Pope Francis arrives in Kenya 5 days before the beginning of a global conference on climate change in Paris. He's expected to emphasize the need to protect the environment for common good when he visits the United Nations offices in Gigiri. Our special correspondent Alex Chamwada takes a look at why the Pope believes climate change is the biggest threat to the fight against poverty.
It is a global problem whose implications are trickling down to villages, respecting no boundaries, affecting peace, security, food production, our health, infrastructure, and most worrying, retarding efforts to fight poverty.
Farmers are directly contributing to curbing the global warming through the mitigation measures that they are undertaking, and also the adaptation, like irrigation is part of the adaptation mechanism that the local farmers are using.
Hatutumii kuni tena, tunatumia biogas peke yake.
Now, Pope Francis is passionate about that subject in the wider context of environmental conservation.
In effect, a selfish and boundless thirst for power and material prosperity leads both to the misuse of available natural resources and to the exclusion of the weak.
In May this year, he released the first papal encyclical, or call it letter, ever dedicated exclusively to the environment. And in it, the Pope states that the environment crisis is not only a scientific, political and economic problem, but also a moral and spiritual challenge.
Environment, if not taken care of, will bring about poverty. And the Pope is very concerned about poverty, of course. But the one significance I see most is the symbolism of his choice of name. He chose the name Francis when he was elected. And Francis, I imagine he was picking on Francis of Assisi, who was himself some kind of an environmentalist. He took care of animals, he took care of the trees, and he sang about nature and so on and so forth.
In his speech at the United Nations headquarters in New York this year, Pope Francis, who is 78 years old, condemned the craving for material gains and power and told world leaders that greed was destroying the earth's resources and aggravating poverty.
Economic and social exclusion is a complete denial of human fraternity and a very grave offense against human rights and the environment.
As we see, on the Christianity talks about Genesis, the beginning of the world, where God created everything for man, and everything he said was so good. That has given us an opportunity to speak about our role as co-creators with God. Every time you add another tree on this earth, you are also creating with God. Every time you plant a new plant or you engage in protecting what can damage God's creation, you are also protecting God's.
For Kenyans, that Nairobi is the environmental capital of the world brings closer home the Pope's appeal for the protection of God-given natural resources.
His ability to speak Africa to the world a few days before the Paris Climate Conference is not only meaningful but very symbolic.
The earth is complaining by hitting back at us.
So it is a global problem requiring global attention, and every nation that cares about the future has a certain position about climate change. Those positions will be presented at the forthcoming climate conference in Paris. The conference begins on the 30th of November to the 11th of December this year. For KTN News, I'm Alex Chamwada.